Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well on this game day. That is right, it is game day. We are about 6.5 hours away from kickoff here in Seattle for the first game of, well, preseason game of the 2023 season for the Seahawks. Very exciting times, very interesting times. There's going to be a lot to say later tonight, but I want to, before we get there, I want to talk about something that is probably going to be one of the more compelling subplots of the Seahawks preseason, which is interesting because it's also one of the things that matters the least to the 2023 Seahawks when the regular season gets here. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you have things that are really interesting in the preseason that immediately cease to be all that interesting when the regular season starts. Maybe that means it shouldn't be interesting in the preseason in the first place. I don't know. But it seems like that's the case here because Carroll hasn't given away a lot about his preseason plans, but he did say that Drew Lock is going to be playing a lot of football during this preseason. He missed a game in the preseason last year because of COVID, and he did not play at all in the regular season. So it's important, as Carroll says in this tweet, this Brady Henderson tweet from a day ago, that it's important for Drew Lock to play in this preseason, and he's going to play a lot. The implication is, and it makes sense why this would also be the case, is that Drew Lock's going to play more than Geno Smith. So he's going to be touching the ball more than any other player on the Seahawks this preseason. So even though there might be some guys who are more interesting to watch from a regular season perspective, Drew Lock is going to be front stage. There is going to be a spotlight on Drew Lock during this preseason, more so than any other Seahawk player, just in terms of how often they're doing things to affect how they are viewed as players. So when I saw this tweet, it kind of got me thinking here because my initial thought was what I just said, that this is a really interesting preseason subplot to see how Drew Lock plays and how he looks and how he's developed, that also immediately loses about 95% of its meaning when the regular season starts because he is a backup. And if all goes according to plan, he will play very, very little and maybe not at all in the actual season. And that kind of got me thinking along another line. And this is what I want to talk about in this video for a little bit. And I want to hear what you guys think in the comments. Do you believe that Drew Lock is part of this team's future? We know he's not part of the present because as of right now, he is the backup quarterback. But do you believe there is a scenario where Drew Lock could still be part of the future plan for the Seattle Seahawks beyond that? And this question, the fact that this is a question is why I thought it was weird that Drew Lock signed that one-year deal with us this most recent offseason. Drew Lock signed that one-year deal. I think it was $4 million with incentives that could take it up to $7 million. He was doing it knowing he was going to be a pure backup. Yes, there was a chance that he would get to play, but it would be the same chance that every other backup in the league has, right? At the end of the day, Drew Lock has about the same odds of playing football this year meaningfully as the guy backing up Aaron Rodgers, the guy backing up Justin Herbert. It's just a matter of, do they get hurt or do they play really bad for an extended period of time? So it was kind of confusing to me that he would do a one-year deal here because he is a young guy still. He hasn't turned 27 yet. He turns 27 in November. He is a guy who hasn't gotten a extended look in the NFL. Well, Denver gave him a decent look, right? Denver gave him about a season and a half worth of starts. Denver gave him some opportunities. He didn't do great. He didn't look all that good. But Drew Lock is clearly still thinking about his NFL career. He is still thinking, if I get a chance in the right situation, if I go to the right team and they use me correctly and I develop properly, I can still be a starter in this league. Drew Lock was a second-round pick, and he's shown flashes of strong competence. His rookie season, 2019, he was actually good. And then Vic Fangio came in as the head coach, and everything kind of flipped. And ever since then, Drew Lock just couldn't get his feet underneath him. And he was a much worse and much less effective quarterback under Fangio. So there is still a distinct possibility that Drew Lock becomes a starter in the NFL. He might only get one more chance, but I do believe that chance is probably coming. So it was kind of interesting to me that he chose to come back here after we re signed Geno Smith, especially on a 1 year deal. Because let's think about this here. The only way Drew Lock plays meaningful football for the Seahawks this year is if Geno gets hurt, which would be bad. We don't want that. Or if Geno Smith plays so bad, we bench him. And we also don't want that. We don't want either of those things. Both of those things mean we're probably having a bad season and everything's going to you know what. So we don't want that. But that is the pathway to Drew Lock actually playing meaningful football this year. It involves the team being very disappointing, which no Seahawks fan is going to want. So, with that being said, what about next year? Well, next year his contract is up because, again, it was a 1 year deal. So, at that point, he is probably going to try to find a place that will at least give him the opportunity to compete for a starting job, which is what he had here last year. That's what a guy like Drew Lock should be looking for, right? He knows he's not going to get handed a starting job, probably. That would be a hard sell, but he can find a team that doesn't have an entrenched starter that can at least give him a chance, which is why I thought maybe he was going to go to Tampa Bay this year because he would have had to compete against Kyle Trask. And he would be hooking up with Dave Canales, who's a guy who he worked with for last year as a assistant coach on the team, with Drew Lock being the backup. So I thought it was going to be something like that. Now that didn't work out. Maybe last offseason there just wasn't that opportunity. But I have to believe that opportunity is going to come at some point. There's going to be some team out there that doesn't really like what they have at quarterback, and they're going to end up flipping things around and bringing in stopgaps, bringing in bridges, bringing in cheap guys who are just there to kind of kill time. And those teams, one of those teams is going to look at Drew Lock and go, hey, let's get this guy for a couple $1,000,000. It's going to be cheap. He's got a big arm. He's got some draft pedigree. Let's see what we got. Let's give him an opportunity to win the starting job. And that is what Drew Lock is looking for, I think. So when you only give him that 1 year deal, you're not really bringing him back to be the quarterback of the future because he's several years younger than Geno Smith. Now, Geno's contract is such that you can get out of it next year and the year after relatively easily, but you would only do that if Geno plays bad, right? And that's obviously not part of the plan. So you basically just brought in Drew Lock to be a pure backup for a year. You brought him in because you need a backup, and he was here last year. So is he part of the future plans here in Seattle? Because some people are going to say, well, you can get him on another 1 year deal next year, maybe. And that may be true. That's possible. You get him on another 1 year, $4 or $5 million deal to be the backup, and eventually maybe his time comes. But next year's draft is looking to be very good at quarterback. And more importantly than that, it's looking to be very good in the area of mid-level quarterback who you can get in the mid or even late portions of the draft and have be your backup and develop him into a starter down the road. Guys like Grayson McCall and Cam Ward, guys like KJ Jefferson. There are going to be guys who are in that mid-level area of the draft, third, fourth, fifth, beyond, that you're going to look at and go, this is a cheap backup QB option that I really like. So if you do something like that, if Drew Lock walks next year and you bring in rookie QB X that you like in the draft, so you just get involved with him in the draft process, and he's somebody that you think is a fit, somebody you think can develop into something good, at the very least become a good backup, if not a decent starter, there's going to be somebody, I think, because next year's draft, it's not like this year's draft was. This year's draft was top heavy with quarterbacks, and the middle class of quarterbacks in the draft really ended up being kind of bad. There was DTR, and that was about it. One or two other guys. Some people are going to have preferences. Some people like Stetson Bennett. Some people like Jaren Hall. Some people like Malik Cunningham, etc., etc. But really, The middle class of quarterbacks in the draft last year, or this year, was weak. Next year, it's not. So drafting a Drew Lock replacement is pretty easy to do. You're saving significant money on the rookie deal versus what you would have given Drew. You're getting younger. You're getting somebody who is probably more amenable to sitting behind Geno for at least another couple years and waiting for his chance, unlike somebody like Drew Lock who is going to be wanting his chance now. So even though we brought back Drew Lock on that deal, is he still part of this team's future? Can you see a way in which Drew Lock eventually becomes the starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks? Do you think that's still a possibility, or is it just not going to work out for him? And what do you think happens next offseason, really? Like, do you think he comes back and just becomes our permanent backup quarterback the way Tavares Jackson used to be? Or do you think that this is just a way to patch the backup quarterback position for another year, and then we try to really resolve it in the draft next year? Like, how do you feel about this whole Drew Lock thing? He was part of that Wilson trade. There was at least a consideration at some point in time from this team that Drew Lock was going to be a quarterback who played meaningful football for the Seahawks. So, I want to hear what you guys think. Getting ready for this game. See you guys later on. There should be a post-game video and probably a post-game stream late tonight after the game is over. Hope to see you guys there. And go Hawks.